Sebastian, I'm sure not much of a holiday for you, just you're reacting to this news. I just wonder just your first take on these new curbs. How disruptive could this be for the semiconductor industry?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think this will likely be more disruptive compared to any curbs that the U.S. government has done on the China semiconductor sector in the past 3-4 years. The reason is that if we read through the whole document, you can find that it is much more comprehensive this time. Even some of the loopholes, some of the gray areas that's left from the previous sections, this time the U.S. government seems to fill in those gaps, trying to restrict China, their semiconductor ambition from all fronts. From their access to the leading-edge software and equipment, to the AI supercomputer chips, and even down to the talents. They also restrict some of the U.S. citizens, to facilitate, to help directly or indirectly the China semiconductor leading-edge technology development. So I guess the implications this time around is much more profound than any sanction they had did in the past couple of years.
Tell me something, Sebastian. We're seeing virtually all of these chip manufacturers coming out and saying that their demand is just awful at the moment, that they're really feeling it. I mean, look at AMD, for one thing, a massive miss they had.
Samsung.
Yeah, exactly, Samsung. And you are looking then, in effect, at an industry under siege. And that was before this happened. This is only going to get worse, isn't it? And you can't just put the doorstep, lay the blame on there being a fall in PC sales.
Exactly. I think from what you see for Samsung or AMD, their earnings or their guidance is mostly centered on, the weakness was mostly centered on the consumer electronic. Like you mentioned, PC, that's a consumer electronic previously. That has been bad for the past couple quarters. But this round of the curbs from the US, they will focus on the artificial intelligence, high-performance computing. Those are more infrastructures, data center related, and that has been resilient, the demand in the past couple quarters when consumer electronics was bad. So if that is also brought down by the new restriction, then as you just mentioned, things will likely to go further south from here.
How do you think the U.S. is going to enforce these new curbs?
Well, I think they, at least they lay out more details this time compared to the past. They lay out even very down to details about the CPU, GPU, AI chip, their performance in terms of the clock speed or even the cells size of some memory. They also mention specifically about the leading edge technology development at which process technology nodes below that would be restricted for logic, for DRAM, for NAND flash. So I guess in the past, the restriction was more vague, but this time there's more detailed, more targeted. In terms of implementation, I guess that's there definitely will be some challenge, but at least the scope this time is more targeted. So I guess well, I think that to reinforce this or to implement this, I guess it will be more relatively easy and also be removing some of the gray areas that some of this supply chain can work around in the past.
Sebastian, also, I mean, the chip industry is seen as, in essence, a reflection of what's going on with the broader global economy, but this kind of muddies the waters there. So, I mean, what is your takeaway then? And how much gloom and doom can we pour on the pessimism that we already have regarding growth, globally speaking?
Well, on one hand, you will view this as the extra negative, as mentioned. Things will get further south. The inventory correction will likely to be deeper and faster. But on the other hand, this is actually not a bad thing because it brings the whole supply chain to face this issue, to face the inventory problem, and they may become more panic to control their inventory, to cut their orders. And that's usually the necessary process for the industry to reach the bottom, to clean out the inventory, and then we can begin a new cycle right after that.
Yeah.
So I think this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the next 1 to 2 quarters will be more challenging. But if the inventory correction is faster, then which means that we can reach the bottom and recovery next phase faster.
Sebastian, maybe the next question: how are you? Are you re-rating the sector in any way in light of this news? What is your revenue outlook or everything for next year now for some of these companies that you cover?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to factor this in. This is definitely a new factor that we have to reevaluate. I think the whole, as mentioned, the hyperverse computing, data centers related, artificial intelligence related materials will also be affected. So that's why I think the overall outlook will be in the next 1 to 2 quarters will likely to be down further. Yeah.
And Sebastian, it's interesting when we start to see these tensions flare up again, you start to hear China saying, look, I'm going to step in, I'm going to support these homegrown sectors now and basically try to do this on their own. Is the localization efforts of China now at risk as well in light of these restrictions, you think?
Yes, that's what we think too, because in the past 3 years, when Huawei was banned, we saw a slew of engineers were moved back from the U.S. to China. And also a lot of the people come out from Huawei HiSilicon, they established a startup company. So the startup ecosystem in China, their domestic semiconductor ambition has been built up aggressively. But this time around, as mentioned, I think the U.S. restrict the access to some of the fundamental technologies from the U.S. and also restrict those U.S. citizens, U.S. persons, to help facilitate China building this leading edge technology development. And if you look at a lot of the top semiconductor company in China, either their chairman or CEO, a lot of them are holding a U.S. passport. So that will become one of the challenge. Yeah.
Sebastian, very quickly here, it's not the whole semiconductor industry is one big beast. Which parts of it are holding up and which are the ones which are going down the toilet?
Well, I think there's still some bright spots in this the whole things, because one angle to look at it is memory sector, because this is the sector that's, if you believe in the first in first out, because this sector has been the firstly faced the inventory correction since more than a year ago, and now they're close to the not the bottom, but they're closer to the bottom. And this time around, if you look at some of the U.S. the curve restriction, they also restrict the China they develop on the memory development on the technology node, the access to the equipment. So there is an argument on the supply side will be positive for the overall memory semiconductor supply demand dynamics. So if anything, while everything looks pretty gloomy, but memory sector is one of the subsector within semis that we think may show some bright spot.